Pain tore through her side. Hot. Unrelenting. She gasped, stumbling forward, every heartbeat screaming that she was already too late, that everything she had run from had finally caught up with her. Behind her, shadows shifted, silent, heavy with intent. Her own blood spattered on her hands and the fire in her veins, silver untamed, flickered and hissed at her touch. He barely controlled it. She barely dared. Her mind raced. Betrayal. His face flashed before her eyes. The man she had been promised to, the man whose kiss had tasted like lies. The one whose name she would have spat from her mouth if she had the chance. She didn't love him. He had never loved him. And now, in this moment, his promises were meaningless, hollow, and worthless. And yet, there was something worse than his betrayal. Something she couldn't outrun. Something waiting. Watching. Something that could end her before she even realized she was alive. Her silver flames sparked again, a pulse of power that left her trembling with both fear and a strange, dangerous hope. Then she felt it. A presence. Not behind her. Not ahead. Beside her. Watching her. Assessing. Like a predator who had been expecting this moment for longer than she had been alive. He stepped into her vision suddenly. No warning, no announcement. Just there, as though he had always been part of this story she hadn't dared to imagine. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low, commanding, impossible to ignore. "Yet, somehow you were expected." Her breath caught. Her pulse spiked. The words hit harder than any blow, heavier than any wound. Expected? How could he know? How could anyone know? And yet she felt it too. The thread of fate that had been woven around her, tighter and sharper than chains, pulling her toward him, toward something she wasn't ready to face. Her hands flared again, silver sparks dancing across her fingertips, sharp and wild. He noticed. Of course he noticed. And in that look, the eyes that weighed her, measured her, saw her completely. She felt everything. Fear, attraction, confusion, vulnerability. All at once. He didn't move to touch her. He didn't move to threaten her. He only watched, and in that watching he changed the rules of everything. A danger lurked just beyond, something she couldn't yet see, something that would test her in ways she had never imagined. But he moved first. Faster than instinct. A force of power, calculated and terrifying. The threat faltered before him, breaking, retreating. And she realized in that instant that she could not, and would not, turn away from him even if her life depended on it. He spoke again, softer this time, almost intimate against the tension that surrounded them. "Your power, it burns brighter than I thought possible. And that frightens more than anyone could understand." Her chest heaved. She wanted to deny him, to reject him, to insist she didn't need anyone. And yet the fire in her hands responded, alive and sentient, pulsing toward him, acknowledging him. Fear twisted with awe. Desire tangled with distrust. The thread of fate had wrapped itself around her, and now for the first time she saw it. Unavoidable, undeniable, unstoppable. This was no ordinary danger. This was no ordinary man. And this was no ordinary moment. Her life had shifted in a single heartbeat, her power flared with a will of its own, and her destiny, her terrifying, impossible, unstoppable destiny, was stepping out of the shadows and into her life. If you love stories that burn like fire, that twist fate and destiny into every heartbeat, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections, because this story will grip your heart and never let go. The figure stepped closer, each movement deliberate, like a predator who owned the ground beneath him. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. He simply existed there, tall, unyielding, radiating a power that made her chest tighten and her pulse spike in ways she couldn't rationalize. There was a weight in the way he looked at her, the kind of weight that pressed against your bones, telling you that you were already marked, already accounted for in some story much larger than your own. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, measured, threading through the air like a warning. "Yet, you've been expected." Her breath hitched. Expected. The word echoed in her mind, unbidden, twisting something in her chest. Who expected her? How? Every instinct screamed to run, to vanish into the shadows, to melt into the night. But there was something magnetic in his presence. Something that made her hands flare again, silver sparks dancing like restless fire across her palms. He noticed, of course. His eyes lingered on the flames as if they spoke to him, as if he understood the language of power in a way that no one else ever could. And for the first time she felt the weight of scrutiny not as a threat, but as acknowledgement. He didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He simply regarded her, a force of inevitability, and in that look she felt her defenses strain, her instincts waver. "You have fire," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "And yet you do not fully command it. Dangerous and rare. Just as the prophecies warned." Prophecies. The words sliced through her thoughts like a blade. Her pulse raced. He knew. He had known. And somehow, even in this moment of terror, that knowledge made her feel both exposed and understood, like he saw not just the girl trembling in the blood and pain, but the force that lived beneath her skin, the flame that demanded release. And then the danger came rushing back. A low growl, and she realized that the threat she had felt all along hadn't disappeared. Wolves, numbers she couldn't begin to count, slammed forward from the shadows. Their teeth gleamed like knives, their eyes burning with hunger. Panic clawed at her chest, sharp and cruel, but he didn't flinch. He moved then, suddenly, fluidly, faster than she could track, his presence expanding into the space around them. Wolves lunged, teeth snapping inches from her skin, but he met them with precision, with a force that made her chest tighten and her knees weaken. He didn't just fight to save her. He dominated the chaos, bending it to his will, commanding the wild in ways she had never seen. And through it all, his eyes never left hers. Calm, unyielding, assessing, calculating. They burned with a mixture of something she couldn't yet name: danger, authority, and a strange, magnetic curiosity that sent shivers racing down her spine. Fear collided with something else. Fascination, reluctant trust, a spark of desire she wasn't ready to admit. The wolves faltered under his presence, their instincts screaming caution, respect, fear. He moved like a shadow through the chaos, striking and parrying, commanding and protecting, and yet he never touched her. Not physically. Not yet. And that restraint, his choice to protect rather than dominate, twisted something deep inside her, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and that unnameable pull that made her silver flames surge brighter. "You are reckless," he said once the wolves retreated just enough to give them a sliver of space. His voice was softer now, dangerous in its quiet. Charging headfirst into danger you cannot yet control. Fire, fury, power, all in hands that do not yet know how to wield it. And yet here you are. She wanted to argue, to deny, to tell him she didn't need anyone, that she could survive alone. But her chest was heaving, her body trembling, and her fire, the silver flame she barely controlled, responded to him, pulsing in rhythm with the magnetic pull she couldn't resist. She swallowed, words failing her. You saved me," she whispered finally, her voice raw, caught between disbelief and awe. He tilted his head slightly, studying her as if weighing the truth in her words. "I did. But I did not do it for you. Not entirely. I did it because destiny demanded it. Because prophecy demanded it. Because you are not yet ready to fall into the wrong hands." Her pulse quickened. The words weren't comforting. They were confounding, terrifying, and yet undeniably true. Something in her quivered, not just from the adrenaline, but from the undeniable reality that she was no longer fully in control of her life, her choices, her path. Every instinct screamed caution, every nerve screamed danger. But beneath that, a thread of connection began to form, fragile yet unbroken. "Who are you?" she asked, though her voice trembled, betraying both fear and fascination. "I am the one you were meant to meet," he said simply. Not boastful. Not threatening. Certain. The words wrapped around her chest like chains and wings all at once. The one who will guide, challenge, and perhaps, if fate allows, protect you. But trust will not come easily. Not to me. Not to yourself. Not yet. She flared her silver flames instinctively, a reflexive pulse of energy that lit the space between them. He noticed. He acknowledged it. And in that acknowledgement something unspoken passed between them. A recognition of power, of fate, of the invisible threads that bound them in ways she did not yet fully understand. The forest, or the clearing, the night, the unseen danger beyond, was alive. Her heart raced, muscles coiled with adrenaline. Fear and fascination tangled into a tight knot she could not unravel. He was enigmatic, dangerous, untouchable. And yet, the pull between them, electric and undeniable, made her skin tingle and her breath hitch in ways she could neither explain nor resist. And then just as suddenly the wolf surged again, breaking the fragile stillness. His movements were instantaneous, fluid, perfect. Teeth and claws fell back under his command, his presence alone bending the wild, the chaos, the threat. He did not falter. He did not tire. He fought to protect her, and in every movement, every strike, every command he demonstrated not just power but intent. She could see it now. This was a man who would bend the world to keep her alive, even if she could not yet trust him. When the last threat withdrew into the shadows, silence fell over them. The only sound was the rapid pulse of their hearts, the faint crackle of silver fire on her palms, and the unspoken connection that had been forged in the chaos. "You are," she started, trying to find words, "dangerous." A faint, unreadable smile touched his lips. "Perhaps. But not as dangerous as the fire you carry, and certainly not as dangerous as destiny itself." Her chest heaved. Exhaustion, fear, relief, and something dangerously intoxicating all collided. She didn't trust him. How could she? And yet she could not deny that in that instant, in that storm of teeth, claws, and fire, he had become her anchor, her puzzle, and the one who held pieces of her fate she hadn't even begun to understand. And somewhere deep inside, amidst the adrenaline and the pain and the spark of silver fire, a quiet, fragile seed of understanding and connection began to grow. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if she wanted to. But she knew she could not look away. Not now. Not ever. Because the alpha who had just appeared in her life, enigmatic, dangerous, unrelenting, was no ordinary man. And she, bloodied, afraid, powerful and defiant, was no ordinary woman. And whatever came next would change everything. The moment the threat faded, the adrenaline began to ebb, leaving a hollow ache in its wake. She sank to the ground, hands trembling, palms still warm with the remnants of her silver flames. Every inch of her body screamed from the battle, from the exertion, from the fear she had tried so desperately to suppress. And yet, beneath the pain, a deeper storm churned. A storm that had been raging inside her long before tonight, long before this forest, long before the man who had appeared like a force of destiny. Memories rose unbidden, sharp as daggers. She remembered the first time her pack had recoiled from her, eyes wide with horror and suspicion as her silver fire had danced across her hands in a moment of instinct. They had called her a curse, a danger, a weapon that should never exist. They had cast her out, leaving her to wander alone in the wilderness of her own fear. Exile had not been a punishment, it had been a declaration. That she did not belong, that she was too dangerous, too powerful, too other. And that memory stung more than any wound she carried now. They had never understood her, had never tried. They had seen only the potential for destruction, the fire they could not control, the chaos that might follow. And in that rejection she had learned to hide, to suppress, to bury herself beneath layers of fear and self-doubt. But the fire never went out. It had only slept, waiting for moments like this, moments of desperation when the world demanded she rise. Her thoughts drifted unwillingly to him, the man she had been engaged to, the alpha king whose charm had masked ambition and cruelty. She had believed in him once, believed in the warmth of his smile, the gentleness of his touch. But she had been blind. She had not seen the hunger behind his eyes, the ease with which he would sacrifice anything, anyone to secure power. The betrayal of his engagement had been both predictable and devastating, a wound she carried as keenly as the one in her side. "Why me?" she whispered to the emptiness around her. The words trembled, shaky, raw. "Why this power? Why him? Why now?" Her silver flames flickered weakly in response, a pulse of frustration and anger that mirrored the questions burning in her mind. She had never asked for this. She had never chosen this path. And yet here she was, marked by power, by destiny, by forces she could neither understand nor resist. She hated it, feared it, yet could not deny the thrill of it, the electricity in her veins, the sense that she was meant for something greater, something terrifying, something extraordinary. And then in the quiet that followed the chaos she felt it. That pull. That undeniable, disorienting tug at her heart, at her instincts, at something deeper than reason. It came from him, the alpha who had appeared, the man who had saved her life without hesitation, without expectation. And it was confusing, forbidden, unacceptable. Her chest tightened as her mind tried to argue against it. He was dangerous. He was forbidden. He was her fiancé's father. Every fiber of her being screamed to reject the thought, to deny the attraction, to push it away with every ounce of will she had left. And yet, she could not. She could not stop thinking of the weight in his eyes, the quiet acknowledgement of her power, the strange understanding in his words. Memories collided with reality. She remembered other moments in her life. Moments of loneliness, of longing, of searching for someone who would see her, who would recognize her fire, her strength, her worth. And here he was, appearing out of the storm, not just seeing her but seeing everything. The realization was intoxicating, terrifying, and destabilizing all at once. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. The silver flames on her hands flared briefly, responding to the magnetic tension in the air, to the presence of a man who should be untouchable, forbidden, impossible. It startled her, made her pulse spike, made her aware of the fragile line between control and chaos that she had always walked. She had never wanted attention, never wanted power. And yet it had found her. And he had found her within it. Shame rose next, bitter and heavy. She had been running from herself as much as from the wolves, from the engagement, from the life that had been forced upon her. She had hidden her power, hidden her desires, hidden her heart. And now, in the presence of a man who challenged every instinct she had, every rule she had lived by, every fear she had carried, the shame felt almost unbearable. He could not trust herself. He could not trust him. And yet, she wanted to. A part of her ached for it, craved it, longed for the recognition, the connection, the intimacy she had been denied her entire life. She wanted someone who could understand the fire in her, who could walk alongside her in chaos, who could see her not as a weapon or a threat, but as a force of nature, powerful and unrestrained, deserving of love and awe and respect. But that longing twisted into confusion, sharp and cruel. Because he was dangerous. Because he was forbidden. Because every part of her instinct screamed that yielding to this pull could destroy everything she thought she knew about loyalty, about family, about herself. And yet, even in that fear, even in that torment, even in that hesitation, she could feel the thread connecting them, taut and electric, pulling her forward whether she wanted to be pulled or not. She pressed her palms to her knees, trying to still the tremor in her body, to quiet the fire in her veins. But the tension did not ease. Her mind raced through memories of exile, of rejection, of betrayal, layering them on top of this present moment where she was faced with a man who was every impossibility she had ever feared and desired all at once. "Why him?" she whispered again, the words barely audible over the racing of her heart. "Why now? Why this? Why me?" The fire in her hands pulsed again, answering her unspoken questions, feeding off her uncertainty, her fear, her longing. It was a reflection of everything inside her, untamed, uncontrollable, and alive. And in the eyes of the man who had saved her, she saw acknowledgement, almost reverence, almost curiosity, almost desire. And that sight shattered something inside her, breaking down walls she had built over years of pain and exile. She realized then, with a mixture of shame and reluctant hope, that she had been running not just from danger, not just from her engagement, not just from her past, but from herself. From the fire she carried, from the destiny she could not yet comprehend, from the desire she could not yet name. And now, standing on the edge of exhaustion, fear, and longing, she understood that the only way forward was to confront it all, to face the pull, to face the impossible, and to accept that some forces, some connections, could not be denied no matter how forbidden or dangerous. Her chest heaved. She stared at the flickering sparks dancing across her palms, trembling with power she barely controlled. And in the corner of her vision she caught the faint shadow of him watching, patient, powerful, waiting. Waiting for her to choose, waiting for her to step forward, waiting for the moment when fear would collide with desire, and when destiny, relentless, inevitable, would begin to claim her. A shiver ran down her spine, not from cold, not from fear, but from the awareness that everything she had believed about herself, about her life, about love, about power, was about to change. And in that shiver she felt both terror and exhilaration, both dread and anticipation, both shame and longing. And she knew, deep in the marrow of her bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. He moved through the shadows with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, each step silent, deliberate, carrying the weight of a lifetime of command. She followed, hesitant, her body still quivering from the adrenaline, from the fire that pulsed beneath her skin, from the gnawing awareness that her life had shifted irreversibly. Every instinct screamed caution, yet she could not resist the pull toward him, the thread of inevitability that tied them together. The grove revealed itself slowly, a hidden sanctum carved from centuries of secrecy. Ancient stones jutted from the earth, etched with symbols older than memory, symbols that seemed to hum beneath her fingertips, resonating with something deep in her soul. The air was thick with magic, an energy she could feel curling around her, stirring the silver flame in her veins, igniting it with tremors of power she could barely control. Her breath caught as she approached the largest stone, its surface engraved with twisting, flowing glyphs. Words appeared, ancient yet strangely familiar. Child of flame, predestined, the one who holds the balance. The letters glowed faintly as her gaze fell upon them, and the flames in her hands leapt higher, responding as if they recognized the significance, as if they understood what her mind refused to grasp. He stumbled back, overwhelmed. I don't belong here. I'm not. Her voice faltered, swallowed by doubt, by shame, by the weight of expectations she had never asked for. She felt the familiar pang of unworthiness, the echo of her pack's rejection, the sting of exile, the lingering bitterness of being called dangerous, cursed, unfit. How could she be anything but a threat? How could she be the future when every step of her life had been defined by fear and failure? He stepped closer, the presence behind her, grounding yet impossibly commanding. You are not the danger, he said, his voice low, resonant, almost reverent. You are the future. Every spark you carry, every pulse of flame, every ounce of power that has been denied, feared, or rejected, it was never meant to harm. It was meant to awaken. His words wrapped around her like a lifeline, yet the skepticism in her chest didn't ease. Awaken to what? She whispered, feeling the silver fire surge and flare across her skin, responding to the words, to the aura of inevitability, to the strange, haunting pull that tied them together. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he held out a hand toward the ancient carvings, and suddenly her vision fractured, shifting in ways she could not comprehend. Ghostly shapes shimmered into existence around her, the phantoms of wolves long gone, of ancestors who had walked this path before, of spirits tied to the land and its magic. Their eyes glowed with spectral light, their forms shifting and flickering like silver flame caught in wind. She stumbled backward, the hair on her arms standing on end. What is this? Her voice trembled with awe and fear, and for a fleeting moment she wanted to run. But the pull toward him, toward the center of the grove, toward destiny itself, anchored her. She could not move away, could not turn from what was unfolding, could not escape the gravity of a truth she was only beginning to sense. You see them, he murmured, not as a question but as an observation. They have always been here. Waiting. Watching. Guiding. And now, they recognize you. Recognition. The word struck a chord deep in her chest. Her flames ignited uncontrollably, silver sparks licking across her fingertips and wrists, illuminating the grove in erratic bursts of light. Each flicker brought clarity and yet confusion, for she glimpsed visions in the sparks, moments she had never lived, faces she did not know, but emotions she felt all the same. Wolves circling, howling in unison, calling her name without words. Ancestors standing solemnly, eyes full of expectation and warning. And a man, him, always at the center, his gaze steady, unflinching yet strangely tender. I don't understand, she said, panic and wonder entwined in her voice. Why me? Why no? Why this power I barely control? Because it is yours, he replied simply. Because you were born to carry it. Because the fire within you is not a curse. It is a bridge. A bridge to survival, to unity, to power that must exist to save us all. And it has been waiting for you to embrace it, just as I have been waiting for you to arrive. Her stomach churned. Waiting for me? But I don't belong here. I'm supposed to be someone else's, engaged to someone I do not love. The words caught in her throat. The shame, the confusion, the longing, all collided in a torrent of self-recrimination. He had never felt so exposed, so small, and yet so vital all at once. He stepped closer, the tension in the air thick enough to taste. You were never meant for him, he said softly but with iron in his tone. Your heart, your destiny, your fire, it belongs to no one else. Not even the expectations placed upon you. You cannot escape what you are. Her flames flared higher, responding to the surge of emotion. The awe, the terror, the impossible attraction she could not name. The air shimmered with heat and silver light, the spirits around her murmuring, echoing her own heartbeat, reminding her that she was the center of something larger than herself. Something ancient. Something alive. A sudden chill broke through the warmth of the flames, a warning she did not need. In the distance she could sense it. Watchers, rival clans aware of the prophecy, lurking, waiting, calculating. They knew. They had always known. And soon they would act. Her chest tightened. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but he placed a steady hand near hers, not touching, not demanding, only anchoring her to reality. You are not weak, he said, voice threaded with quiet awe. You are not the danger. You are the beginning. And beginnings are always messy, always frightening. But without them nothing changes. Without you nothing survives. She swallowed, trying to steady her trembling hands, trying to ground herself amidst the fire, the spirits, the pull of something she could neither understand nor resist. Her mind screamed in confusion, the threads of destiny tangling with her fear, her shame, her desire, her longing. Am I enough? She whispered, the question breaking free despite the fire, the magic, the weight of prophecy pressing down upon her. He looked at her, eyes steady, unwavering, full of something she could not name. Respect, awe, perhaps something deeper. You are more than enough, he said. You are inevitable. And when you embrace what you are, when you step fully into the fire, you will see. Everything, even those who doubt you, even those who hunt you, will bow to what is meant to be. Her silver flames surged in response, untamed now, a pulse of power that reflected the storm of emotion inside her. She could feel it in her bones, in her pulse, in her breath. She was not alone. She had never been alone. The fire, the prophecy, the spirits, the pull of destiny, it was all real. And it was all hers. But the weight of it pressed on her, threatening to crush, to overwhelm. She felt fear, excitement, shame, longing, all tangled into a single knot of emotion that she could not unravel. And yet, even in the terror, even in the uncertainty, even in the sparks that danced uncontrollably from her hands, she felt something else. Purpose. The Alpha watched her, patient, unyielding, a silent promise threading through his presence. You are not just a girl with fire, he said softly, almost as if he were speaking to himself as much as to her. You are the center of what must happen. And you will decide how it begins. A shiver ran through her, not from fear, not from cold, but from the realization that she was standing on the threshold of everything she had been running from, and everything she had been running toward. The future, the prophecy, the fire, the pull toward him, all of it collided in that sacred grove, in that moment that felt both infinite and fleeting, and she knew, that her life, her destiny, and her heart would never be hers again in the way she had thought. Because the myth had awakened. And she was at its center. The grove's fragile stillness shattered like glass under a hammer. From the edge of the clearing, shadows moved, dark and deliberate, limbs and eyes glinting with menace. Wolves, larger and faster than any she had ever faced, emerged in a blur of fur and teeth, their snarls ripping through the night air like thunderclaps. She froze for a heartbeat, chest tightening as terror coiled around her. But he moved first, every muscle honed, every instinct razor-sharp. The Alpha's presence expanded, a palpable force that rippled outward, pushing back the intruders, bending the chaos to his command. He roared, a sound that echoed like rolling stone across the grove, and the wolves faltered, sensing the authority they could not challenge. But the numbers were overwhelming, and she realized with a pang that survival would demand more than strength. It would demand cunning, instinct, and fire. "Stay behind me," he commanded, but the words barely reached her over the cacophony of snarls and snapping jaws. Her instincts rebelled, urging her forward, her silver flames pulsing in anticipation, a heartbeat ahead of danger. She could feel it, danger and opportunity, fear and power, colliding in every fiber of her being. The first wave struck. Wolves lunged from the shadows, jaws snapping, claws raking. He met them with unyielding precision, striking, dodging, and commanding with movements that blurred between human and beast. Every action drew her gaze, pulling her attention, weaving a dangerous spell of fascination and awe. She knew she should be afraid, she was. But the fire inside her responded to the chaos, igniting brighter, dancing faster, as if the grove itself demanded her participation. And then the council arrived. Figures cloaked in authority and tradition, their eyes sharp with accusation, their voices slicing through the night. "You are a threat," one spat, venom coating every syllable. "The prophecy marks her as dangerous. She is not welcome. She will destroy us all if allowed to live freely." The words cut deeper than any fong could. Shame and fear surged, threatening to overwhelm her, but he stood taller, stepping forward, a living barrier between her and the judgment that would have consumed her. "She is not a threat," he said, voice ringing with authority, fire threading through every syllable. "She is the future. Deny her and you deny survival itself." Murmurs of dissent rippled through the council, hands twitching toward weapons, eyes narrowing with fear and suspicion. He glanced at her, eyes searching hers, and she saw it. The conflict flickering there, the impossible weight of loyalty clashing with something far deeper, something that should not exist but burned nonetheless. The pull between them, magnetic and forbidden, tightened around them both, and she felt it like a pressure in her chest, in her veins, in her very soul. The wolves surged again, more coordinated this time, as if sensing the cracks in his control. She stumbled, breath ragged, the flames in her hands surging like live coals, craving release, threatening to consume everything. He reached for her, hand hovering near her shoulder, a tether of authority and restraint, but the council's shouts, the snarls, the chaos, they pressed in and instinct drove her forward. "I can't," she whispered, words lost to the wind. But her silver fire answered for her, surging in a brilliant blaze that lit the grove in stark, surreal silver. Wolves recoiled instinctively, hunters faltered, and the ground itself seemed to pulse in response, echoing her rising power. He roared again, a warning, a command, a plea, but she didn't wait. Every ounce of fear, every shred of shame, every lingering thread of longing and frustration and fury surged into a single decision: survival, freedom, mastery. She leapt, silver flames blazing around her, a comet of light streaking through the chaos, untamed and unstoppable. Behind her she heard the clash, the struggle, the impossible weight of choices. He faced the council, the wolves, the hunters, and she knew he had to choose. Loyalty to his pack, loyalty to the prophecy, loyalty to her? His gaze flicked to hers once, long enough to promise, long enough to warn, long enough to bind her in a thread she could not yet see. She ran, heart pounding, silver fire blazing brighter than ever, cutting through the darkness, illuminating the path she did not yet know but instinctively trusted. Every step was agony, fear, exhilaration, but also liberation. She could feel the power in her veins, the pulse of destiny thrumming through her, and in that raw, unfiltered chaos she glimpsed herself, not the girl who had been rejected, exiled, and hunted, but the force she was meant to be. And yet the pull of him lingered, a shadow at the edge of her vision, a whisper in her mind, a reminder that even as she escaped, even as she embraced the fire, even as she ran toward mastery and survival, she was not alone. He was there, watching, choosing, weighing, fighting, and in that tension, that magnetic, forbidden, heart-shattering tension, a connection deeper than fear or reason or desire began to anchor them both. Her breaths came fast, ragged, each exhale leaving a silver trail that pulsed with the rhythm of her heart. Her legs burned, her muscles screamed, but the flames, her silver fire, danced, illuminating every shadow, every twisted branch, every leaf wet with frost. She had survived the first clash. She had escaped the immediate danger. But she knew it was only the beginning. Every instinct, every nerve, every ounce of awareness screamed that the world had not yet fully struck. Rival packs, hunters, enemies lurking in the shadows, they were aware now. They would come again. And when they did, she would not be alone, but she would not yet be fully prepared. Her mind flicked to him, to the alpha who had saved her, who had stood against the council, whose presence lingered even across the distance. The pull between them, dangerous and forbidden, tightened, and she realized with a pang that survival was no longer just about running or mastering her power. It was about understanding the connection she could not yet name, could not yet claim, could not yet resist. The silver flames pulsed, brighter and wilder with every heartbeat, a living beacon in the darkness. And as she disappeared into the edge of the forest, a vow solidified in her chest. She would master her power, she would confront the prophecy, she would survive, and when the time came she would return. Because the world had struck first, but she would strike back harder. And the fire, her fire, would burn brighter than anything they had ever seen. The forest opened into a hidden glade, soft moss cushioning the ground, silver moonlight spilling like liquid across the clearing. The chaos of the previous night, the wolves, the council's accusations, the fleeing, the fire, it all felt like a distant nightmare here. The air was quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves, the faint whisper of a stream, the gentle brush of wind through the trees. And for the first time in what felt like forever she could breathe. He had led her here, silently, without command or expectation, but with the kind of quiet authority that made the world feel stable for the first time since the prophecy had been revealed. He knelt beside her, hands moving over her wounds with precise, careful motions. Every touch was a spark, not just of healing but of something deeper, something forbidden. Her pulse jumped, not from pain but from awareness. Every brush of his fingers against her skin, deliberate or not, sent shivers down her spine, igniting sparks that weren't entirely silver fire. "You shouldn't have run into them alone," he said softly, voice low, intimate, filled with concern and something unspoken that made her stomach twist. "They would have taken you, or worse." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted, voice trembling more from vulnerability than from fear. I don't trust easily. I never have." He didn't recoil. He didn't question her. He just nodded once as if he understood. "I know. I see you. All of you." The words wrapped around her, soft and heavy, binding her heart in ways she did not expect. "Every scar, every fear, every bit of fire you carry. I see it." Her silver eyes caught the moonlight, glinting with sparks of fire and emotion. "Can I believe in love?" she whispered, hesitating, her voice fragile, almost a breath. "Or only danger?" He paused, looking away for a heartbeat, then back, his gaze unwavering, yet heavy with the weight of his own past. "Love isn't safe," he admitted, his voice quiet, raw. "Not for people like us. Not for those who carry fire that others fear. But it's real. And it can be trusted if you choose to believe it." Her chest tightened, lungs catching, as if his words were a mirror to her soul, reflecting a truth she had tried to bury. The fire within her pulsed hotter, responding to him, to the intimacy, to the dangerous magnetism that neither of them could deny. The night stretched on. He tended to her wounds, speaking little, but his presence said everything. When he finally spoke again, it was not about battle, prophecy, or danger. It was about him. A confession wrapped in shadows and restraint. "I've lost people," he murmured, eyes cast downward, jaw tight. "People I should have protected. People who trusted me. And I've carried it like a weight that never lightens. You make me want to believe I can still protect someone without losing them. Without failing them." Her breath caught. This was a side of him she had not seen. The vulnerability beneath the alpha, the man behind the power, the depth beyond the control. She felt an aching empathy for him, mirrored by the ache in her own chest, tangled with longing, fear, and something dangerous. Something forbidden. "I've never been able to control it," she confessed finally, voice shaking. "The fire, the power. I was told it was a curse. I was told it would destroy everything I touch. I don't know if I can be trusted with it. With myself." He leaned closer, the warmth from his body brushing hers, but he didn't cross the line, didn't force the moment. Instead, he let the silence speak, let her words sink into the night. "Then let me see it," he said simply. "Let me see you fully. And I will stand beside it, beside you. Even if it burns. Especially if it burns." He swallowed, heart hammering, mind spinning. The pull between them was magnetic, nearly impossible to resist, yet tempered by the knowledge that every inch of closeness carried danger. She felt herself inching forward, drawn by a combination of awe, longing, and the intoxicating sense that here at this moment, she could be herself, unseen, unjudged, recognized. He offered his hand, not a command but an invitation. Tentatively she placed hers in his. The contact was electric, a spark of fire leaping from her to him, a pulse of connection neither of them could ignore. She felt a shiver run up her arm, the silver flame responding, not destructively but alive, like a heartbeat syncing with his. They sat in silence for a long moment, the moonlight catching in her silver eyes, his shadow stretching across the glade like a protective curtain. Her body ached for touch, for reassurance, for something forbidden, yet the unspoken restraint made every second sharper, more intimate. It was as if the world had paused just for them, and the danger outside, the rival clans, the prophecy, the wolves, did not exist. Or perhaps it did, lurking just beyond the light, making the fragile moment all the more precious, all the more impossible. "I've been afraid my whole life," she admitted, voice barely audible. "Afraid of fire, afraid of power, afraid of people like you. Afraid of wanting things I shouldn't." He studied her, the intensity in his gaze like a magnet pulling at her core. "And yet here you are," he said softly, "facing every fear, every doubt, every spark of chaos that lives in you. And still you shine. Still you run toward the impossible, not away from it. That is strength, not recklessness. That is who you are." Her pulse raced, the fire in her veins responding like a living thing, coiling around her heart, around him, binding them in a tension that was sweet and terrible all at once. She wanted to lean into him, to let the desire and need and trust surge forward, but caution gripped her. The world outside the glade was still unforgiving. The prophecy was still unfolding. The Alpha Father, the councils, the rival packs, they would not wait. And yet in that soft, moonlit glade, amidst the quiet rustle of leaves and the faint murmur of the stream, something fragile and real took root. Connection. Trust. Attraction. Something that could survive fear, chaos, and forbidden circumstance, if only they allowed it. He reached out again, just close enough that her breath mingled with his, close enough that the pulse of the silver fire thrummed between them. His words were low, almost a whisper, yet deliberate, grounding her. "You can trust me. Or you can leave. The choice is yours." Her heart caught in her throat. She wanted to leap forward, to let herself believe in him, in them, in something more than survival. She wanted to surrender to the fire and the pull that neither prophecy nor fear could undo. And yet, the world outside waited, dark and hungry, ready to strike. Her gaze met his, silver flame reflecting in the moonlight, emotion raw and exposed. I want to believe," she admitted, voice trembling, vulnerable. "But every step forward feels like walking into a storm. And storms are where fire is born," he murmured, voice soft yet fierce, brushing against her like a promise. "And you are fire." Her pulse quickened. The tension between them was a living thing, thrumming in the air, in her veins, in every nerve ending. Almost without thinking, she leaned forward, almost kissing him, a breath away from crossing the line, from surrendering to the pull that had been building since the first moment he appeared. But hesitation gripped her heart. The danger, the prophecy, the forbidden nature of their connection, forcing her to pull back just enough to taste what could be without letting it consume her entirely. He didn't push, didn't question. Instead, he mirrored her restraint, close enough that the warmth of his presence seared against her skin, and yet distant enough to remind her that trust, like fire, must be cultivated, nurtured, and respected. The night stretched around them, alive with possibility and tension, silver flame glimmering faintly on her hands, reflecting the unspoken promise between them, that the storm outside could wait, that the fire inside was theirs to wield, and that perhaps even in the shadow of destiny, trust, and something far more dangerous and intoxicating, was possible. And as the moon traced arcs across the sky, she realized with a jolt that for the first time she was not just surviving. He was beginning to live. The wind had shifted. It carried with it whispers, sharp as blades, slicing through the tension that had been coiled so tightly around her chest. The glade, once safe, no longer felt like a sanctuary. The council, hidden in shadowed corners and behind rotting trees, had followed her, waiting for this moment. And they were not alone. Another presence lingered, a rival alpha whose eyes glimmered with malice, anticipation, and the cold satisfaction of someone who had long awaited her fall. A voice, smooth, venomous, and public, rang out, echoing across the glade like gunfire. "So this is the one," the council elder sneered. "The child of a forbidden union. The fire that was never meant to exist. You." Her blood ran cold. Heart hammering, she stared at him, her body tense, breath ragged, every nerve screaming that this moment had arrived, that the veil of secrecy, of protection, of fragile hope, had been ripped away. Every memory of exile, of whispered threats, of rejection, of her fiancé's charm masking cruelty, flashed through her mind. And now it was exposed. Publicly. The truth of her lineage, the forbidden fire, the prophecy, twisted, weaponized, wielded like a dagger to her chest. Her fiancé's father, the alpha who had saved her, the man who had been a tether of stability and forbidden desire, stepped forward, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to pause. All eyes, all expectation, all judgment focused on him. His jaw tightened, eyes darkening with internal conflict. 1,000 unspoken words battled behind his gaze, but in that instant hesitation, a slight falter, shattered the fragile bond between them. "She is dangerous," the elder spat, twisting the prophecy with venomous delight. "The child of flame. She is destined to destroy us all. Do you not see it, Alpha? Do you not see what she could bring upon us?" Anger and betrayal collided in her chest like lightning striking dry earth. Her legs trembled, hands curling into fists, and the silver flame, a fire she had tried to control, a spark of hope, a tether to her own strength, surged unpredictably. Sparks leapt from her fingertips, bright and jagged, illuminating the glade in jagged flashes of silver light. Wolves snarled, retreating at the intensity. Hunters froze mid-step, and the council stumbled backward, eyes wide in fear. The alpha's hesitation had shattered something vital inside her. She had trusted, dared to believe in the bond they had forged. And now that trust hung in the air, fragile and broken, a whisper of what could have been. Rage coursed through her veins, mingling with fear, grief, and the raw ache of betrayal. Every word, every glance, every accusation struck her like a blow, and she realized she could not wait any longer. "You will not decide my fate," she hissed, voice sharp, trembling with fury. "You will not weaponize my life, my fire, my existence against me." The silver flame ignited fully this time, spiraling up her arms, licking at the night sky, a storm of energy barely contained. The wind screamed in response, leaves whipping in wild arcs, and the moonlight reflected off her eyes, silver, fierce, impossible. She took a step forward, and the ground beneath her seemed to pulse with her anger, her power, her refusal to bow to their fear. He reached for her, the alpha, his voice breaking through the roar of the wind and flame. "Wait, don't." But she would not wait. Not for him. Not for anyone. Not even for the prophecy he had once claimed would guide her. This was her moment, her power, her anger, her truth. And she would not allow it to be corrupted, twisted, or stolen. Her voice rose, filled with the fury of generations, with the grief of rejection and exile, with the heat of fire denied and feared. "I am not your weapon. I am not your curse. I am me." And the silver flame answered, bursting outward in jagged waves, illuminating every face, every shadow, every betrayal. Wolves recoiled, hunters faltered, the council shrieked, and the alpha stood, momentarily paralyzed by the sheer force of her unleashed power. Sparks crackled in the air like living stars, illuminating the storm that had gathered in her heart. Tears blurred her vision, anger and sorrow mingling in a tempest that matched the fury of her flames. The wind tore at her hair, whipping her cloak, and yet she stood unwavering, defiant, radiant in her destruction. Every accusation, every whispered judgment, every doubt that had been placed upon her now fueled her, transforming fear into a weapon she could wield. She felt the pull of destiny tighten around her again, more insistent than ever, and she understood with a clarity born of pain and power, that she would no longer be led by anyone else's fear or expectation. The prophecy might have been twisted against her, but she could rewrite it in her own fire, on her own terms. And then, as quickly as it had erupted, the moment shattered. She turned, vanishing into the stormy night, the silver flame leaving a trail behind her like a comet blazing across the sky. The alpha tried to follow, but the storm, both in the air and in her heart, kept her steps unpredictable, untouchable. She ran not just from them but toward herself, toward the mastery of the fire that defined her, toward a destiny no one could claim but her. The council muttered in fear and disbelief. The rival alpha snarled, eyes blazing, but she was gone, leaving nothing behind but silver light fading into shadow. And in the stillness that followed, the forest seemed to whisper her name, carrying with it a promise and a warning. She was no longer the girl who could be controlled, feared, or hidden. She was fire, she was storm, she was the child of flame. And the night would never be the same again. The wind tore through the valley like a scream, carrying with it the scent of smoke, blood, and iron. The pack's ritual site, a sacred circle etched into ancient stone, carved by generations long gone, was under siege. Wolves snarled, teeth bared, claws scraping against rock and earth. Hunters pressed forward, and in the center the Alpha Father, her tether, her danger, her forbidden desire, stood surrounded, the weight of leadership pressing down on him, lines of fear and restraint etched into his jaw. She appeared then suddenly like a phantom riding the storm. Her footsteps did not touch the earth. The silver flame enveloped her, coiling around her like a living thing. Every heartbeat of hers pulsed in tandem with the fire, resonating in the stones beneath her, in the air above, in the very veins of the pack that waited, watching, hoping, fearing. She paused on a jagged outcrop, eyes blazing silver in the chaos. The rival Alpha, predatory, cruel, a shadow of ambition, stopped, stunned by the intensity, by the inevitability, by the raw force that had once been whispered of in fear-filled council halls. "You think you can threaten my pack," she said, voice ringing like steel forged in moonlight. "My mate," she added, voice dropping, trembling with fury, "or anyone I care for and not pay the price?" The ground quaked beneath her. Not metaphorically. Literally. Cracks spiderwebbed outward from where she stood, fissures spitting sparks that mirrored the fire dancing along her arms. Wolves skittered, hunters faltered, and even the Alpha Father blinked, unprepared for the magnitude of her power now fully claimed. She felt it surge through her, unrelenting, uncontainable, the fire that had flickered uncertainly in the forest glade, that had pulsed and sparked in moments of fear and rage. Now it roared, a tempest incarnate. She did not run. He did not hesitate. She stepped forward, and the silver flame leapt, rising like a storm of living light, wrapping around her body, around her spirit, around every memory of betrayal, exile, and rejection. Her hands blazed, her wolf instincts flaring. She shifted, the transformation seamless and inevitable. Limbs elongating, senses sharpening, eyes glimmering like molten silver. Her wolf form, ancestral and immense, emerged from the storm of flame, majestic, terrifying, untouchable. Her roar split the night, a sound that carried the weight of her lineage, the fury of injustice and the promise of reckoning. The rival Alpha recoiled, arrogance cracking into terror as the flames spiraled toward him, consuming shadow, fear, and defiance. She could see him now, really see him. His control, his hunger for dominance, the darkness he had carried. And she understood, with the clarity of fire and wolf instinct combined, that he had underestimated what it meant to challenge the child of flame. Her voice lifted, not human, not fully wolf, but a bridge between worlds, carrying the echoes of ancestors, the thunder of generations past. "I am not your sacrifice," she proclaimed, the words rolling over the battlefield, shaking stones, rattling teeth, igniting courage in her pack. "I am fire. I am storm. I am everything you feared and more." The earth shuddered beneath her fury. Sparks of silver ignited the air like shooting stars, illuminating the ritual circle, the ancient carvings, the jagged cliffs. Trees bent under the force of her power, the air vibrating with energy so intense it left no shadow unshaken. Wolves howled in resonance, a chorus of loyalty and awe that wrapped around her like a cloak, joining in the ancient song of power and reclamation. The rival Alpha surged forward, attempting dominance, teeth bared, claws striking, but she met him fully, wolf against wolf, fire against shadow, instinct against cruelty. The clash sent shockwaves through the valley, stones cracked, light burst from the sacred circle, and the night itself seemed to convulse under the magnitude of her presence. He tried to command her, to intimidate, to twist the prophecy, but the words bounced off the silver flame, powerless against the force of her will. She had embraced herself, every scar, every spark, every forbidden gift, and she was unstoppable. Her fire lit the night sky, illuminating ancient ruins that had lain dormant for centuries. They shuddered, awoke, and trembled, resonating with her ancestral call. The Alpha Father watched, awe and fear mingled in his gaze, understanding fully now that she had not only survived betrayal, heartbreak, and exile, she had transcended them. The girl he had once saved was gone. In her place stood a force of nature, luminous, wrathful, and magnificent. And yet, in the silver reflection of her eyes, he saw more than destruction. He saw hope, loyalty, and the kind of love forged not in comfort but in fire. She slowed, circling the rival Alpha like a comet tracing the edge of his world. Her silver flame pulsed, contracting and expanding, a heartbeat of light and power. He knew defeat was inevitable, and yet defiance clung to him like a stubborn shadow. But she did not strike to kill, not yet. She struck to command respect, to assert power, to remind every witness that destiny was hers to wield, not theirs to dictate. "Do you see now?" she asked, voice carrying through storm and flame. "Do you see the cost of underestimating me? The cost of denying the fire in me? You have gambled with more than your pride. You have gambled with the balance of this world. And I will not lose what is mine." The ground quaked again as she leapt, silver flame bursting in every direction. The rival Alpha stumbled backward, beaten not just by power but by inevitability. Every stone, every leaf, every wolf and hunter present felt the magnitude of her awakening. She was no longer hidden. She was no longer uncertain. She was fully realized. The child of flame, the storm incarnate, the force the prophecy had whispered about for generations. And in that moment she sensed it. Another presence, darker, more patient, more ancient than the rival Alpha. Something had been watching, waiting, testing, and now stepped fully into the open. A shadow darker than night itself, eyes glowing with intent, teeth bared, and power that rivaled hers. The true villain, the force behind the threats, the betrayals, the chaos, revealed itself. Her silver flame flared higher, higher, a crown of light and fury, as she prepared to meet this ultimate challenge. Wolves circled, pack members trembling, hunters frozen, the Alpha father watching from the edge of danger, torn between fear and awe. She would not falter. She could not falter. The storm inside her roared, ancestral voices echoing, fire burning, body and soul aligned with destiny. "I am not your sacrifice," she repeated, voice reverberating like thunder across the valley. "And I will not be bound by fear, by betrayal, or by prophecy. I am the storm. I am the fire. And I am coming for you." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating her fully in silver brilliance, wolf form and flame intertwined, every muscle coiled, every nerve alive, every heartbeat a drum of war, of reclamation, of destiny. The air itself seemed to tremble, as if acknowledging her arrival, her transformation, her unyielding will. The enemy stepped closer, confident yet wary, the night now a canvas for her wrath, her power, her emergence. The valley held its breath, waiting for the first move, the first strike, the first moment where silver fire and shadow would collide in a spectacle of fury and destiny. And in that suspended, electric moment she understood fully. She was no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer subject to anyone else's fear or control. She had claimed her power. She had claimed her fire. And the night itself would remember her name. The storm had begun to quiet, though not entirely. The air still trembled with silver fire, with the echoes of her roar, with the distant tremors of awakened ruins. The night held its breath. Wolves prowled in cautious arcs, their senses alert, the shadows of hunters lingering at the edges, uncertain now, fearful now, as if the world itself had shifted beneath the weight of her power. And she stood there, half human, half wolf, fully unrestrained, fire blazing around her like a living aura. Every muscle coiled, every sense heightened, eyes reflecting moonlight and magic, her breath coming in ragged but purposeful draws. She had claimed what had always been hers, her power, her destiny, her voice. And yet, she did not smile. There was no triumph, not yet. There was only the weight of choice. The Alpha father watched from the ridge, heart pounding, chest tight, torn between all fear, and the something more that had been growing between them, something forbidden, raw, and unspoken. He wanted to step forward, to call her back, to anchor her in safety, and yet he knew that to do so now would risk everything, including the fragile thread of trust they had woven in the forest glade. Her gaze swept the battlefield, landing on allies and enemies alike. The rival Alpha was broken, scattered, shadows of fear in his eyes. But the true threat, the one that had lingered unseen, patient and dark, had not moved. Eyes glowing, muscles taut, power radiating in silence, it waited, watching, testing, measuring. And she knew, deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. The wind carried a whisper through the trees, a voice not entirely human, not entirely wolf, but belonging to the world itself. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? The words struck her heart like ice and fire intertwined. She trembled, not from fear but from the weight of all that had come before. betrayal, exile, the twisted prophecy, the love denied, the longing for connection. Every choice, every step, every spark of power had led her here, to this precipice, to the edge between survival and dominance, between isolation and belonging. The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for an answer that could not yet come. And in that pause the haunting truth became clear. The world would have to decide. Her destiny could not be contained, her power could not be silenced, and the fire in her heart, untamed, beautiful, dangerous, would demand acknowledgement, respect, or fear. She lifted her head, silver flame rippling along her fur, eyes scanning the horizon. The wind carried the sense of allies, enemies, and unseen forces alike. Her claws dug into the stone beneath her, grounding her, anchoring her, reminding her that she was alive, fierce, and unstoppable. Every heartbeat matched the rhythm of the storm, the pulse of her fire, the lingering question that hung like lightning over the battlefield. Would they see her as she truly was? Would they fear the power she had embraced, or would they choose to stand with her, to acknowledge the fire that could reshape destinies? The night was quiet again, almost unbearably so, and she knew that the answer would come not in words, but in choices, in loyalty, in courage, or in betrayal yet to be revealed. And then, as if the universe itself conspired to linger in the tension, her voice, human, wolf, and something ancestral all at once, rose in a whisper, carrying through the silver-lit night. I am not yours to fear. I am mine to follow. The wind answered, bending trees, scattering sparks of silver flame across the glade. Shadows danced. Wolves howled. The enemy shivered. And the Alpha Father, watching from the ridge, felt the impossible truth settle in his chest. She was no longer the girl he had saved. She was the storm, the fire, the child of prophecy, and everything would have to change. And in that lingering, suspended moment, the narrator's voice, soft and haunting, carried a final echo to every listener. If this story lit a fire in your heart, if you felt the pull of forbidden love, the weight of destiny, the roar of power in your veins, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections. Here, we tell tales that burn, love that defies destiny, and power that demands respect. Will you choose her side, or fear her too? The night held its breath one final time, silver flame reflecting in eyes that would not be forgotten, a world poised on the edge of fire and shadow, love and danger, trust and betrayal. And the story, her story, was far from over. The storm had passed, but the air was heavy with the echoes of fire and fury. The battlefield lay in muted ruin, scorched earth and silver flame glittering in the moonlight, wolves lingering cautiously, eyes wide, ears twitching to every whisper of movement. She walked slowly through it all, steps deliberate, the weight of what had transpired pressed into every motion, yet carried with it a quiet, unyielding strength. The Alpha Father followed a few paces behind, silent, cautious, watching her with a mixture of awe, concern, and something unspoken that throbbed like a pulse between them. The night itself seemed calm, but it was a calm that carried the tension of storms yet to come. Shadows stretched long, twisting across the ruined glade, clinging to the trees, the stones, the shattered ritual circle. The wind whispered over the scarred earth, carrying hints of distant danger, of eyes that had watched and measured, of forces that had only begun to stir. Every nerve in her body vibrated with awareness. Alert, wary, alive, and even in her wolf form the fire in her veins hummed, thrummed, ready to respond to the faintest tremor of threat. She did not speak. He did not need to. The silver flame that still danced along her fur, faint but persistent, said enough. It told of survival, of power reclaimed, of fury mastered. It said that she would no longer be hidden, no longer dismissed, no longer controlled. The Alpha Father understood this without words. A silent acknowledgement passing between them that transcended explanation. It was respect, fear, and attraction all intertwined, a fragile thread holding steady even as the world shifted around them. And yet, beneath the calm, the ground trembled ever so subtly. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a whisper against stone and root, a quiet murmur beneath their feet. But it carried a warning, one that made the hair along her spine rise, that made the Alpha Father shift his stance, eyes narrowing in instinctive recognition. Something was coming. Something ancient, something patient, something that had watched in silence while she claimed what was hers. From the darkness, a voice echoed, low, chilling, not quite human, not quite wolf, but laced with authority and inevitability. It slithered through the glade, wrapping around trees, stones, and the edges of consciousness. She is not the only one. The true alpha has yet to rise. Her ears flattened, body tensing, silver flame flickering in response. The Alpha Father's hand hovered near hers as if ready to step forward, but she shook her head ever so slightly, a silent command that this was her storm to face. The words lingered, heavy and prophetic, a promise of trials and chaos yet to come. A shadow moved in the corner of her vision, just beyond recognition, a shape that would not fully reveal itself, and yet its presence pressed down like a weight on the night. They continued walking, leaving behind the ruined circle, the battered ground, the echoes of those who had tried to stand against her. Wolves padded at their flanks, silent guardians, their eyes reflecting both fear and respect. The moonlight glinted off the silver flame in her fur, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like warnings etched into the world itself. Her mind, however, was quiet, calm in the sense that only one who has stared into the abyss and returned can know. She was thinking, yes, of the battle, of the enemies fallen or fleeing, but also of the future. Of the prophecy twisted against her, the rival alpha shattered yet still lurking in memory, the darker presence that had made itself known, and the fire in her veins that now demanded allegiance, mastery, and readiness. The Alpha Father, silent beside her, finally spoke, his voice low, cautious, yet tinged with something softer, warmer. This isn't the end. You know that, don't you? She glanced at him, eyes silver, unreadable yet alive with everything she had become. No, she whispered, voice carrying both warning and promise. It is only the beginning. The wind picked up again, scattering leaves, ashes, and faint sparks of silver flame across the empty glade. Somewhere in the shadows, the true alpha, older, darker, more patient than any they had faced, shifted, unseen but felt, a presence that promised chaos, challenge, and the ultimate reckoning. Her silver flame flared once more, small but intense, a heartbeat against the dark. Wolves growled softly, attentive. The Alpha Father exhaled, tense yet steadfast. And in that suspended, trembling moment, the narrator's voice rose, slow, ominous, prophetic, carrying through the night, through the minds of all who had witnessed, and through the hearts of those who would yet witness her story. The fire has been claimed. The storm walks among us. The prophecy stirs. And she is not alone. The true Alpha has yet to rise. Watch closely, listen carefully, for the next shadow that moves will not wait. And the world will remember her. The camera of the mind, the way the night might see it, pulled back slowly. The glade receded, the ruins shimmered faintly in silver light, the wolves receded into the trees, and the wind carried whispers of what had been, what was, and what must come. And then gradually darkness claimed the scene, leaving only the lingering sense of destiny, power, and suspense. A story unfinished, a world poised for the next clash, and a heroine whose fire refused to be ignored. The night held her secret and it waited,